Welcome to the Skool, where we talk about the business of design and the design of business. This is our first episode here at Blind Studios with Chris Doe and myself, Jose Caballer, where we're going to be talking about design, we're going to be talking about business, we're going to be talking about trends, we're going to be talking about web, about motion, a lot of great stuff. And the only thing I'm going to say promotionally is to make sure you subscribe to the channel. I'll remind you at the end, and then we'll keep on going. Chris, how are you?
I'm doing great, Jose.
Cool.
I'm happy to be doing this with you.
I'm excited to be here at Blind.
We have a couple people here in the studio with us, so from time to time you'll see us talk off camera. Nicole, Marco, and Ty are here with us, so we'll be sure to repeat those questions so that you guys can hear it.
I mean, it's great to have the audience in terms of getting the questions because Nicole represents the audience. She's somebody who watched my previous show, This Week in Web Design, and big shout out to the network and to Jason Calacanis. Thank you for those 2 years of awesomeness. Let's just get right into it.
We're going to do 3 topics, right?
Yeah.
3 topics, 10 minutes each. Keep this short and sweet.
Go for it.
The first part is, let's talk about how you got started in this industry and trying to call out the pivotal moment. Like, is there a key point, a decision you had to make, an unexpected path possibly that led you to where you are?
The starting point was Art Center College of Design, where both of us went, and I graduated in '96. I went to New York, started at an agency called Razorfish, which was one of the first digital agencies. Here's what's weird. I was wanting to be in motion graphics. You actually got me jobs in motion graphics here in LA, and it was a lot of work. It was actually kind of like, tough.
Basically, you had a couple of experiences when people were working to 3, 4, 5 in the morning, and it was just grueling. And so what you got was a taste of what it was like to be in production.
Right.
And it didn't sit well with you.
Right.
I suspect it's something beyond just laziness. We're just couching it as that. But I think maybe intellectually you wanted to be challenged more, and you kind of saw like where that path was leading. That's a production path, and that's a man behind the machine.
Actually, that's a really good observation. It almost was that I felt that it was too, it wasn't not as smart enough, but just challenging enough. And in New York, what was interesting is I worked till 3 in the morning anyway, but we were involved in the client's businesses. Like, I got to sit with the VP of, project of programming, and not programming in the show sense, but in the computer sense of Time Warner, and talk about their needs coming up for their new cable broadband service called, Roadrunner. Wow, this is history. Broadband's not even a big, we're still at 56K modems here in '96. So I got involved. I was able to be at the table with the business, where at an agency or at a production shop, I would never see, Steven Spielberg, even though I was working on his Saving Private Ryan trailers, till 3 in the morning. So that's, how about you? I mean, how did you get started?
What was happening in the internet world in '96? Just to do a little flashback, that's like Netscape was the browser. The dominant browser by far.
Yeah.
And we're talking like Web 1.2, something like that. So pretty rough. This is pre-Flash, pre-everything.
It was called Future Splash when it came out.
What was it called?
Future Splash.
All right.
That was the name of Flash, and it wasn't even like it wasn't
so
even.
You're dating
96.
yourself a little bit now.
Yeah, it was a few years later, and then Macromedia bought it.
Right.
The state of the industry back then was everybody was trying to figure out. It was the Wild West. You can make any claim you wanted that the internet would change the world, that everything was going to be digital. If it can be digital, it will be digital. That's a direct quote from our marketing materials, which I also managed at Razorfish to do a lot of the design for. It was a pretty heady time. We were walking around New York City like we were ballers. And it was a pretty interesting time also from a technology, from a design standpoint. A lot of kids that worked, that went to Art Center with me went to the same firm, Razorfish, and quit because they were like, this is not a studio. This is not an agency. This is not design. This is something else. And we're working crazy hours and it's weird shit. So ultimately, I kind of was curious about that. I actually knew, I'll tell you something really weird and eerie. The minute I saw the Razorfish website, it was black. It had like a weird logo designed by Ryan McGinnis, who's now a famous artist. And it didn't look like it was designed like high design, like modernist, and like the stuff we're used to. It looked more like some brash obnoxiousness, right? And I was really attracted to that. I'm like, as you can see with the identity for the school, I'm like, whoa, this is interesting. And I knew I would work there. I didn't get the job when I got interviewed at Art Center. I just moved to New York. And I knew I would figure it out. And literally, for Nicole, who wants to know like the behind the story, I was at a party at the Cooper Hewitt 6 months after I started working in New York at an ad agency. I ran into Thomas Mueller, who was a colleague from Art Center, who became who was the creative director at Racer Vision, became my boss. He's like, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm not doing anything. I'm working at an ad agency. You want to come work at Racer Vision?" Sure. That was it. Done. He had already interviewed me, etc. So it was kind of a natural fit. But I'll say this, and I'll let you tell your story. For me, it was a huge education. It was going to the dark side, quote unquote, and learning a lot of the business aspects and getting the ability to see behind the curtain, which you don't get to do at a studio as a 24-year-old. Did you? You were crazy. You started your studio almost like straight out of school.
Right.
So talk about that.
All right. I studied graphic design at Art Center, and we actually crossed paths a couple of times. When I was a little bit ahead of you in terms of my schooling, right? And so for me, as soon as I saw my first animation, now I'm going to date myself, this is when Kosa made After Effects before Adobe bought it. Some of you guys may know, so it's After Effects 1.0. I got this ability to move something around the screen, a pixel, some type, and to do cross dissolves and things like that. Some very rudimentary things, but it really excited me. It felt like I was in control of directing these kind of digital actors moving around the screen. Didn't know what I was doing. The term motion graphics did not exist, but it really excited me. So after getting out of school, started a company, and I've been running a company ever since. I've been teaching myself and learning on the job what this motion graphics thing is, because a program to teach it didn't exist. I mean, programming in terms of a university environment or something like that. But Nicole had asked before about what was the big transitional point, like how did I get my first client and how did I get the first big client? Yeah. And we do basically what everybody does in a situation like this, where we have limited contacts, social network is pretty small. We reach out to friends, people that you work with, people you went to school with, and we wound up doing jobs for very little money, doing a 30-second drug-free America job for a few $100s, and worked for weeks on it, sleeping on the floor, managing the renders. Back then, the rendering horsepower isn't nearly what it is today. We're talking about hours per frame for moving type across the screen.
So the question is almost like, what did you base the fact that you did all this work for $100, versus charging more?
I'll be honest. The word strategy for a 20-some-odd-year-old person at that point in time I didn't even know what that word meant.
You were like 26. Yeah.
Look, let's think about this. I wanted to work. I didn't have professional work to show, and I wanted to gain experience. And if somebody's going to pay me something to do that, great. I would have paid to do it. And that's the bottom line. And I learned some things, and the project that we wound up working on got us some exposure. Not a ton. It won us a few awards, and foolishly I thought maybe you win a couple of awards, the door opens for you magically.
Lots of work.
The reality is it doesn't. Nobody cares about those awards except for your mom maybe or other designers. Okay?
That's true. That's true.
That's a reality. But I remember, because when I was going to school, we would have guests, artists, entrepreneurs, business owners come and speak. And one of the questions always came up, like, when was your big break? And sometimes people couldn't remember, like maybe it was just this very gradual
it is gradual
process,
it
just becomes. For me, it wasn't gradual. I knew exactly when. I can trace it back to one defining moment.
What was that?
There was a woman that I met at a small LA advertising agency. I showed her my portfolio, our reel at that moment in time, and she kind of had a very polite response, which is, nice work, I like it, but it wasn't overly effusive or enthusiastic about the work. So I thought, she's being very polite, that's cool. We'll never hear from this person again. It turns out that person was recruited by a bigger agency that was just coming onto the scene. They had a New York office and they were going to open up one in LA. So she got recruited by them. And so when she started to work on these local car spots, she called us up and said, can you help me out with this? And I always knew, I don't know at that point much about motion, but I knew how to design with typography, and that's my strength. So we did these typesets, and as you know, local car spots have lots of type. The price point, the price per month, the APR, all those kinds of things. So we can rely on our typographic skills. So we started to animate something like 27 titles, which started out to be like 19, which was what the bid was for. So at the end of the job, I felt a little abused, and I didn't have a producer. I didn't know how to budget these things. I didn't know how to do any of this stuff, and there was a sting and kind of a bad taste in my mouth. And I told my wife, I don't want to work with them again.
But
they called again.
They called again.
And said, you know what, we got more work, and here's the budget for it. So that was a very definitive moment, because it took us from doing obscure work that, truth be told, nobody ever saw,
Right.
to work that you would see across the United States. And as that agency grew to take on the entire regional account, they took on the national account, which is what we're used to seeing. Those are the big anthemic, big budget TV spots. And then they gave us all of their work. And that opened the door for represented by a commercial rep. Because prior to that, their whole mantra, it comes something like this as catch-22. Until you do professional national work,
yeah.
we can't represent you.
Yeah.
It's too hard of a sell. As soon as I did that, I called the rep. It was a done deal. And that moment changed the course in which we're going to go. Otherwise, we would sit there in obscurity and keep plugging away at it. So that was a big deal.
That's interesting. I mean, that's the same story, I think. I can trace back when we made the transition from doing small projects. And something, Nicole, I think that I heard in what Chris was saying is that, you know, when you start, you do anything that you can do to get your foot in the door and to do any type of work. And I think, you know, be faithful in the little and you'll be faithful in the big is a great refrain. My first client was Razorfish when I started my own shop. But I did a lot of different projects, especially in the community, you know, the fine arts community, you know, they needed websites, you know, for whatever, USC, from friends who knew me from Razorfish, producers from Razorfish. So it was just the immediate people in my network who would call, and I would say yes to almost anything that was reasonable, right? And that was in the price range that I understood, you know, agencies can do. The difference was that, you know, motion graphics was pretty undefined when you started. You're like a grandfather of motion graphics because it hasn't been around that long. Neither has web, actually. It all started around the same time.
I guess that was a lot a kind of where we came from.
96.
And if you guys want to know more, how do they get in contact with us? Should they tweet you?
Tweet you. Or you can tweet at the Skool Rocks. There you go. At the Skool Rocks.
Tweet at the Skool Rocks.
Yeah. And we'll tell more of the story.
We can tell
in future
more
episodes.
if you want to know more. There's some crazy stories in there.
questions.
But let's talk about today. What's going on today? What's the state of the
let's
industry?
forward it.
There's a lot of change going on, and some of us are riding that crest, and some of us are getting crushed by the wave. Some of us are just somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
Where do you see digital as it exists in 2014 in January?
We're in January 2014. So, well, I mean, look, bottom line is that things are changing, and we know what the state of the industry is across the board. Digital is, or like Mark Andreessen, you know, kind of said, software's eating the world, right? Everything is becoming automated. Everything is becoming software, basically.
Right. So what is it for a person who's either entering the market or kind of in a transitional space, maybe like myself, and we'll kind of dovetail that in a little bit. What's that snapshot view of 2014 digital as it exists for designers? Lots of opportunity, not a lot of opportunity, very competitive, things have scaled back. What do you, what's the temperature?
I see designers who either used to do print or motion or who hadn't been very digital, wanting to know how to get into user experience.
Why is that?
Because the jobs have kind of slightly gone away on the traditional marketing sides. Because advertising spending is going away from it's going away from traditional media like TV and print to digital. And by 2017, 30% of the budgets are all going to be for digital. 70% is still traditional media. And the primary component of traditional media is actually not the production work. It's actually the ad buying. So a lot of people, when they see these huge numbers for what ad spending is, the networks are making that. And currently, they're battling it out because you have TV, traditional networks, and cable, and you have the web, Netflix and all these, and Hulu, and that's what you hear about, net neutrality and all that kind of stuff. The battle right now is where the money's at. Who took all that money away? Google did. I'm just going to blame Google and ads. Google, it's your fault.
What I hear from you is digital is only going to get bigger.
Yep.
Until it gobbles up everything.
Pretty much.
There are more opportunities in tech, Silicon Valley, startups, Silicon Beach, Silicon Alley, anything Silicon, I suppose.
Yeah.
And so some designers may find a lot more barriers to getting work in traditional design and looking for work in digital. So you're saying it's a great time to be a digital interactive designer, user experience, user interface, all that kind of stuff, right?
Hell yeah.
Okay, so very optimistic.
I'm very optimistic.
2014.
I'm super optimistic for 2014.
Okay.
If you know, and then I see a lot of people who are afraid of it because of the language aspects,
Right.
But they have all the skills. They just don't know they do. Like, what's UX?
Yeah, digital is like jargon heavy with
Yeah.
very specific, very niche-driven titles
Yeah.
that somebody took from the corporate world and mashed up with digital and just
Yeah.
came up with these things.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous how many different subtitles there are.
I don't really care. I never did. I mean, when I went
But
into the whole...
it could be daunting. If you're getting in and they're talking about the difference between information architecture or user experience, those things can seem kind of confusing.
Yeah, but don't worry. The people you're talking to don't know either. So don't... I'm
But
serious.
hey, isn't this the point of us getting together to talk about these things?
Yeah, it
We're
is. It is.
You're going to help demystify some of this stuff and explain
Yes.
it in
In
very
easy
real
terms.
terms
Yeah.
that people can understand, so you can walk into a room or at least a party and hold yourself,
Yeah.
you know. Oh, so the state of industry for motion, I think Jose's touched on a lot of these things before. If you're a company like ours, you service basically advertising agencies. Advertising agencies have the relationship with the client. They come up with a strategy. They write the copy. They write the script. And then they send it out to have people like us bid on it. And the bids can be very competitive. That's kind of the state of the industry right now. Just as a point of context, right around 1999, pre-dot-com bubble burst, there were a handful of motion design firms that you could call on to do national level work. We were lucky enough to be one of those people. So competition was relatively low. Today, within a 5-mile radius, you're going to have a heavy concentration of motion design firms here. And so people basically are designing, writing treatments, figuring out the entire production methodology, and at some point, even doing animatic video tests, these kinds of things, for free in the hopes of getting the job, which sometimes isn't even real. That's very depressing. Now, in the past, this was okay. The reason why it was okay, and I say in the past, like in the past 2 years, maybe pre-recent recession,
yeah.
right? We're talking about 2007, 2008. The budgets were big enough that you could afford to go after these, spend $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 at a time going after new business.
Wow.
And land a job and still make money.
It's ridiculous.
But now the budgets have shrank, and it's not done in a vacuum. What's happening is clients have become very sophisticated. Clients meaning Nike, Coca-Cola, big brands. They have internal brand managers that they've, cherry-picked from the industry and bring people in who know what they're doing, and then they break the work up to different agencies. So what used to be the realm of one agency of record, AOR, is now broken up between several agencies, and they're losing the media buy, which is, like you said, where all the money is at.
Yep.
So an ad might cost $1 million to make, but the media buy for that might be $100 million.
Yep.
I'm exaggerating a little bit, but
No, but you're right.
American Express, last time I was told this, spent $500 million in media buy a year annually.
Wow.
That's the media buy budget. So the agencies made a percentage of that. So what do the agencies have to do to react to this? They're now becoming like the design studio. So they're bringing in-house design because they're not making money in these other areas. So as you can see, we're in that food chain, pretty far down that food chain. So it's time to figure this thing out.
Interesting.
So I see the opportunity of what's happening with motion and integrating with digital, and digital integrating with motion. It seems like it's a conversation that's happening more and more often. So
And that's why we're here at this table. I mean, the reason why we're digital,
motion.
So, but let's talk about it from a trend standpoint, or from our audience is freelancers, our audience is agency people, our audience is our friends and peers, hi mom, etc. But the reality is that what we're going through in terms of the shift in the industry. It's a reflection of a broader trend in the economy as a whole,
But we can't affect that, right? So
well, we can.
we can.
Yeah.
Man.
Well, the school. So here's this goes back into why I even went to Razorfish, or why I really prefer doing digital more. So here's the thing that I really like. It was transactional. You can sell stuff on a website and a web browser. It was informational. You can get information. It was communication. You can actually talk back and forth. You can chat and email and stuff like that. What I didn't like about working in motion graphics, or working in a studio, or working in the role of a designer at a traditional agency, is that you're the butt of the process, that you're under the colonization of corporations. Now I'm getting all like, fight
the power?
Fight the power on, Sac de la Rocha, which makes me old because Rage Against the Machine hasn't been popular in many years. It gets into this point that the economics of it are really not tailored towards the production people, right? So when I saw the digital, I'm like, dude, I'm inherently entrepreneurial. So when I saw the fact that if I learned all this stuff, I could eventually become, that person, right? Not work for the person, but become the person. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Is that weird that my whole reason
you
for
fight the man by becoming the man?
By becoming yes.
All right, I got you.
That's the whole thing. What do you think about me having that attitude?
I think it's fine.
Okay.
I think if you look at, if you've read Tony Hsieh's book on delivering happiness, he talks about the science of happiness. And one of those pillars is 4 points, right? Perceived control. That's a big deal. So when you're at I wouldn't describe myself as the butt of anything, but when you're at the end of a creative cycle, most of the control has been relinquished. And not that I'm a control freak, but I want to make sure the decisions that or my experience and my expertise can come into play and help maybe do something for less money or create fewer problems for the clients on the back end. Just like with digital, right? If you understand what the user's needs are at the beginning, you can save a lot of unnecessary work and resources being consumed for no reason. So understanding how it's going to work at the end allows you to begin in a way that is informed.
Got it.
So I think that's really important.
So efficiency is still one of your priorities, and it's interesting how you couch it. And it does reflect who you are, too. It's very interesting.
Is that an Asian thing?
No.
Okay.
That's just a personality thing, not an Asian thing.
Okay.
But no, but each person brings themselves and their experience to the table.
How does one go from possibly surviving in this climate? For you say digital is amazing, to going from surviving to thriving, or just getting started in this process?
Ultimately, it's for me, and this is something that you've heard me say over and over again. It's about shifting away from production to doing more of the strategic and understanding the needs of the customers of your customer, and helping them meet their objectives and therefore helping them meet their goals. So at the core of thriving in digital, there's all the hard skills like knowing Photoshop, knowing how to do HTML, knowing how to write, JavaScript and PHP, which different people do, right? Different roles can do. Sometimes the same person can do all of those. And I think there's too much focus on that sometimes. And, like if you've seen some of the past shows, This Week in Web Design, you would see in the comments a lot of times, like, just get to the point, get to the, because people thought it was a how-to, like, tutorial on a particular topic. This format is even clearer that we're just talking about the business of design and the design of business. But the reason why I'm saying that is that in order for somebody to thrive, not just survive, you can survive doing production. I know guys and girls that make, that just do design, or just do use information architecture, or just do animation, or just do one thing or the other, and they make great money. They have to sell themselves. They're probably freelance.
But I see a problem with that, though.
What's the problem with that?
That's being offshored. All that kind of work is being offshored.
That is true.
So you can see development right now being done in India, Latin America, Asia, for less than 10 cents on the dollar.
True.
And they're very technically proficient. And so
Yes.
there's this little barrier between coding and moving up from that design. I think it's only a matter of time before that also gets offshored. That's my opinion. Why am I involved in talking to you? Why are we doing this thing together? It's because you're teaching people strategic thinking. That's what this thing does. Facilitation and strategic thinking. That moves you out of the doing to the thinking.
Yes.
And that is not something that can be easily offshored. There's cultural issues. There's just a whole different way of thinking, design thinking,
Yeah.
that it's going to be much harder to offshore. So if you want some insurance or protection against your job being shipped overseas by somebody that can do it 10 cents on the dollar, you got to move up.
But how do you move up? You got trained, we went to Art Center, we did some thinking, but most of it was doing. So whether you went to CalArts or whether you went to Art Center, when you went to RISD, or you didn't go to school, one of the challenges is that no one teaches, design thinking is still not incorporated into curriculums. It's starting to, and people are starting to move, education. And then also the trend that nobody wants to go to school anymore if they can get the technical skills online on lynda.com or on Udemy or on tons of websites that are going to teach you how to code.
Yeah.
Code Academy, Treehouse, all
Sure.
people that I love, right? So, well, I'm proving your point, actually. Damn it. So the question is, how do you learn design thinking? Where do you learn design thinking? What has been your experience in our conversations and kind of beginning the strategic journey versus, understanding it from where I come from and how I've been doing it?
Ask me that in a different way, please.
What do you think? I want to ask it in a way that it doesn't sound promotional.
It's like
I'm trying to do Charlie Rose version of it.
Or
so,
you're like leading me down.
Theoretically,
a very,
without being too self-promotional for the Skool products, what do you think of the Skool's core kind of process and systems?
Well, I think what I've seen from you and what I've learned from a process of teaching and facilitation is if you work from the point of view of a user-centric problem solving, it helps you to understand the strategy. So before we were kind of talking about how designers at the end of all the decisions being made, that's a pretty far gap between the problem and your opportunity to affect that problem. And so you'll make decisions without the information necessary, and so sometimes you'll be off message, off brand, or off strategy. So if you can move yourself closer to finding out what the real problem is, finding out what the brand voice is, and the brand personality, understanding who the users are, their goals and their needs, you can make an informed design decision. And I'm going to sound like a broken record, but this is very empowering.
Yeah.
So now when we say, you know what, the design should look like this ultra premium thing, it's backed up because I understand the users want that feeling.
Got it.
Or if it's looking very tranquil or like a day spa, that's because the users want that.
So that's interesting what you just said, because Forrester just came out with a research coming that we're in the and entered the era of the customer, that everything should be personalizing like exactly as the customer wants it. So what you're saying is that what you've learned is how to actually define that sufficiently to give them that. And not just, it's not your creative vision or your artistic subjectivity, it's exactly what the customer wants.
Look, this is not anything new, right?
No.
In the digital world, it's called UX, user experience design.
Yeah.
But ergonomics, it's been around for a long time, designing for humans.
User design, user factors.
Yeah, user factors, is that what that's called?
Yeah.
Okay, so a brand like OXO, the
Yeah.
Good Grips company,
Yeah.
they design for real people and they look at how people use things. And they're a great company that's admired by a lot of people, and they're like gobbling up market share because they understand how to design for a user.
So user-focused design has always existed. It's now it's become so important because everything is digital, and everything and now even more so that you're touching everything. Interesting. So the product design philosophy or the product design methods are now that were for physical products are now being used for digital products. Let's do not a brainstorm, but an envisioning exercise of imagining, we're 3-4 years from now, 5 years from now, and now we're in a thriving industry. What is it that we're doing?
What is it that we're doing?
Like if we were to envision that future. Like what should people out there be doing? Collaborating, that kind of stuff, multidisciplinary.
I don't know. I think people have to think about how they can provide real value for their customers, or in that case, users. And to be moving out of the doing and the making of things into the thinking of things and being more strategic. I mean, I think as far as motion is concerned, we're trained to tell stories. And there are lots of companies out there, especially now that the distribution network has been kind of liberated, broken, whatever. It's not a handful of media companies that control it. Everybody can publish content now, video, build a site. The question is, what can you do to stand out from that, kind of get out of that white noise? Because there's so much that's competing for your attention. So you can use those skills that you've learned about design, about storytelling, and to drive people to look at what it is that you're trying to do. And I see video as being a big driving force behind that. Because let's just face it, people are less likely to read than they used to.
Yeah.
And if you can give them information that they're looking for to educate them, to teach them something, you provide real value to them. And you're giving it in a way that they're not only looking at it, they're reading it, they're seeing it, they're hearing it. So you're activating way more parts of the brain.
So
And
what
I think
we're
that's
doing
the power
here,
of video. I don't know.
No,
let's
but what
find
we're
out.
doing here is exactly that. What we're doing here is that we're on video.
Right.
We're talking about the issues in our industry, and the reason why we're even at the table together is because we both reach out to each other saying, "Hey, listen, you're doing video, I'm doing online video education. This is something that makes sense."
Here's what I see: is if you make video content in very near future, a year or two from now, maybe sooner, maybe later, what's going to happen is you become the network, the content creator, and the advertiser and the advertising channel all in one. That is pretty amazing.
It is.
Talk about having
Power.
control, not just about the design. You pick the advertiser.
Yeah.
You create the ads for them because they want to advertise on your network. And so it could be very personal and tailored for your audience. Anyways, let's turn it over to Marco. Marco, what's your question?
How do you make a living by doing that?
Damn it, you're getting too
Who you
tangible.
asking?
How do you make a living?
How do
You
you,
guys
how
have
do you,
time.
You live at a friend's house on the floor.
I mean, how are you gonna make money out of it? Everything is free. You can watch this content free online.
He's talking about business models. How do you make money?
Okay,
from-
let's end it on that question.
Let's end it
How
on
do
that.
you make money in digital
Next week.
or video?
You'll find that out. Tune in.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the topic of next week. Marco's question. How do you make money at it?
Thanks for tuning in, you guys. We'll see you next week. I'm Chris Doe, and this is Jose Caballer. He put the baller in Caballer. And if you like what you're seeing, subscribe up here.